welcome to the RunFinity Sprint 1 review. Over the course of this video, we're going to give you an overview of what we did during Sprint 1, breaking it down by user story and developer, and then give you an insight into some of the things that we struggled with, and then an overview of what's going to happen leading into Sprint 2 and as we draw closer to the end of this development. You'll hear from each of the developers, Jack, James, Nikita, Cameron, and then myself, as we explain what we worked on during each part of the project and how it all came together as each user story satisfied the definition of done.
Hi, I'm Jack. I'm a developer on the RunFinity team, and for this Sprint 1 I was working on the user stories so that the user could see their historic location on the map as they travel along, and so the user can also visualize the speed that they are running. So progress started off very fast with polyline development so that the user can see their historic location. Within the first 5 sprint days it was fully completed. This is because other parts of the project was reliant on having this done to be able to visualize the GPS moving and the user actually traveling from one location to the other. The second user story that I'm working on around the coloring the line so that they can visualize their speed. Around the 11th day into the sprint, I started on developing that so that the color was random, so that we had different colors in each stage between the new GPS point and the previous GPS point. So getting the speed data was depending on Nikita having completed his user story. And then Nikita and I were both able to take the speed data and be able to display it onto the polyline in different colors so that it visualizes the different speeds that the user will be traveling at. And the problems that we had around this was, after developing the polyline, implementing the speed visualization on it was difficult around making the speed, the color different in each stage between the 2 points. As a start, it was changing the color of the whole line depending on the most recent speed, and then we worked together, Nikita and I, to change this so that it was within each section was a different color depending on the speed that they were traveling at that time.
My name is Nikita and I was working on the user story to start the run. So it was involved me to do some UI changes. So the bottom sheet would come up with the run details as the user runs, and as well as creating a background service to receive all the location updates, as well as Google Feed APIs to receive the current number of calories burned and steps. I was working on the database as well because I had to save all the data into the database, such as every location update and the steps and the calories. So my user story took the entire sprint. So at some point, I stopped the work on my user story and passed the data gathered to other group members so they could work on their user stories, as well as I can help them with understanding of the background services in Android. And by the time I've done helping other group members, I was able to return to my user story and ensure that the definition of done was met. I ran across a couple of problems, especially with connecting the service, Android service and the activity, as well as researching and implementing Google APIs to fetch the data, the step data and the calories data. So once this was done, I was able to meet the definition of done and commit my changes.
Okay, my name is James. I'm also a developer on the RunFinity team. My user stories were mostly the same. It was all to do with logins to the app once one person opens it originally. So there was actually 3 user stories in the end, one for Google API, one for Facebook, and one for just standard login through our app alone. Okay, in order to start my user stories, Tom and I had to implement a Firebase database in order to store all relevant information for each account. Ultimately, progress through this quite quickly. Apart from the Facebook SDK, which is much larger than first anticipated, which required some effort to work out and to ultimately finish. Once we eventually did work through the Facebook issues, they pretty much met the criteria for done on the 3 user stories. That was it.
Hi, my name's Cam. I'm one of the developers on the RunFinity team. For my user story, I was working on run control, or the pause button. In order to create the pause button, I had to rely on quite a lot of code from my other team members, so it took a while before I could start. However, once I did get started, implementing the button was relatively simple and not too many problems were faced. My issues lay in creating the user interface. When I added the pause button, it broke the bottom sheet slightly and it didn't display right. And I ended up going to Nikita and asking for help in fixing that. Once I got some help in fixing that one small problem, we were able to define it as done and move on to the rest of the app.
Hi, my name's Tom. I'm a developer and a Scrum Master for the RunFinity project. During Sprint 1, I worked on displaying the user's GPS location. That required an understanding of the Google Maps API, some general user interface design, as well as designing the slide sheet, which will later turn into the menu options, and helped James set up the Firebase. Because getting the location data is a priority for this our app being a running app that requires user location, that was something that I focused on going straight into the sprint so that others could use the data that we generated. The user interface design was a slowly evolving process as we changed the colors and some of the UI elements, and it will continue to evolve over the duration of the following sprints. The slide menu itself, which was considered part of this sprint, was not something that happened until quite a lot later on, as it wasn't a high priority for us. Because of the size of the Maps API, I needed to spend a lot of time focusing on that, and that was one of the problems that I faced, was getting my head around how that worked and some of the calls that it needed to make. And as well as, because of the way that Android works, we had to change the way we'd originally implemented it so that the maps and the location data was implemented as a service. And that required a little bit of tweaking, which Nikita actually took over. But once we had that changed over, we were able to progress really smoothly and define everything as done.
So you heard a lot of talk about what the user story is being considered done, but our definition of done is when the user story achieves all the acceptance tests, the code has been reviewed by another member of our wonderful team here, the function and the feature has been tested by another squad member as well, the features and functions have been approved by the product owner, changes can be implemented into the master build without causing an error or breaking the GitHub. The code is on GitHub and again has not broken the GitHub. The code build is successful, bugs have been noted down and or squished. The user interface design stays true to our design guidelines, and overall it is simple. And that is our definition of done.
We dealt with the problems that popped up using pair programming. This involved having one of us that was having a problem with someone that thought they knew what the solution was, or that could bring another set of fresh eyes to it, going over and helping them to work through the problems, and 9 times out of 10 it worked. Other times we had to get together as a group, like we did during one of the breaks, and just smash through a bunch of programming using more of a mob programming technique.
As you can see by our burn down chart, we felt that we performed quite well and that we stuck to our timeframes, and we were very happy with it.
For some unforeseen work, it was mainly just about UI perfection, integration, and the databases. Mainly things like the start and run buttons, not lining up on the screen correctly, or just being odd sizes and shapes, wrong colors, that sort of thing. And also, we didn't really plan the database creation in our sprint originally very well, so we sort of had to come back to that and sort of loop around, which mainly caused to the fact that our user stories were quite simplistic in first creation, so we had to sort of think about them in a bit more detail and come back to them, add some more.
In further updates, we're gonna be working on squashing the bugs, logging the run more permanently, and rewarding the users for achieving their goals. We look forward to work on RunFinity in the next sprint and hope that review has given you a little bit of insight of the Sprint 1 development. Thanks for watching.